explained to him that I would be talking today to Nick Freeman, the lawyer known as Mr. Loophole, who would be providing you with advice, Luke, as to how you can now take legal action against Mr. Ahmed. And I'm pleased to say Nick joins us now. Good morning, Nick.
Morning, Jonathan.
I'd really hoped that he would do the right thing following the conversation yesterday and organise to transfer over the money that he'd taken from Luke. It would appear he still hasn't taken that opportunity. So what's the next step, Nick?
Well, he seems to be giving Luke and yourself the runaround, and that's not really a sensible course of action, particularly as you've named him on the programme, and there can be a considerable more aggravation coming his way. I mean, the law is very much against Mr. Ahmed. I apologise. First of all, you start with the Sale of Goods Act, that the car has to be a fit for purpose of merchantable quality. It clearly wasn't. We don't know what the fault is. We're now never going to know unless someone comes forward, one of his mechanics who tested the car before it went on the road, and that's always a possibility, whether it's faulty wiring or something like that. But I would suggest that, Luke, one of the things you do, and I'm going to suggest several things, one of the things you do is you report the matter to trading standards, because the car clearly wasn't fit for purposes. As Jonathan said, cars don't just blow up. There's always a reason for it. And before a car is sold, they have to go through the car and make sure it is fit for purpose. So there will be a mechanic who's done that. There will be somebody accountable for that, and trading standards can investigate that, and they will speak to Mr. Ahmed and see what measures he's put in place. And it may be, I'm not suggesting it is, it may be that actually the car wasn't tested properly and there's been some misrepresentations. And of course, if that is so, then there are consequences in terms of a prosecution for Mr. Ahmed, so far as that is concerned. You obviously are out of pocket to a considerable sum, and also, as Jonathan says, you could have been killed as a consequence of this accident. If there has been no proper checks on the car, it may well be worth reporting the matter to the police. First of all, I would let trading standards investigate, because if the car has just been passed on and there may have even been a fault there, an electrical fault, which the garage knew about, the mechanic knew about and did nothing about. I'm not saying they did, I'm not saying they didn't. But if it's established that there was, then there's potentially a criminal charge there of manslaughter. But there could have been a criminal charge. Obviously, unfortunately, nobody was hurt. But it's certainly worth reporting it to the police. They might want to investigate it after trading standards. So I'd let trading standards do their job first of all, and depending upon the results of trading standards, you might consider reporting it to the police. In terms of your consumer rights, well, they're more buoyant now than they have ever been because of the pandemic. And you can actually buy a car, and within 14 days, you're entitled to a full refund without having to give any explanation whatsoever during this pandemic. So it could be a faulty wiper, it could be anything. You're entitled to have your money back in full within 14 days. That is the end. In terms of the Consumer Rights Act, you're entitled to a full refund within 30 days. Now, Jonathan's correct. The garage, the AA are correct, and Jonathan correctly retells this. The AA would suggest that an independent examiner appointed by the garage test the car and examine it. Well, they basically told you to get on your bike. They weren't interested in it, and in my view, they've forfeited that right. And it will not assist them now to say, well, actually, we've now decided we want to test the car, because they had that opportunity. It's gone. It will not assist them in any court of law, because the situation has been brought about by their own conduct, their own willful refusal to engage with you and actually do what the law requires them to do. So you're entitled under COVID legislation to a full refund within 14 days. You're entitled to a full refund within 30 days under the Consumer Rights Act of 2015. And just for the sake of completeness, if a car is faulty, you're entitled to a refund within the first 6 months, provided you give the garage an opportunity of fixing it once. So there is a raft of legislation there in your favour. And if Mr. Ahmed is listening to this programme, it may be that from his reputation perspective and future business dealings, he may think it's very prudent actually to speak to you after this programme and apologise and say, look, I made a terrible mistake here. Let me refund you for the damage you've incurred. Because, of course, if you start a civil claim, and that's what I would advise you to do, if you don't receive a call in the small claims court, you will be entitled to compensation for your losses. And also, you, of course, have had the terrible experience of having to leap out of the car on a busy motorway during a fire with your passenger. You were in fear of your own life, and there will be a financial price based on that as well. So costs, of course, will escalate. So I would advise you to start an action in the small claims court for your loss, for what the amount is. Now, I understand that the AA are no longer with this garage because there's a suggestion that the garage is closed down.
Yes, and in fact, on Companies House, it suggests there's an application to strike Aux Motors Limited off.
Right, so this is where it gets a little bit difficult. Because there is a separate corporate veil, a limited company, it is very hard to pursue an action if the company is wound up against Mr. Ahmed on a personal basis. It's not impossible, but it's complicated. So if the business went into liquidation, the insolvency practitioners who would deal with that liquidation would then decide exactly what's happened and whether or not Mr. Ahmed should be responsible for reimbursing you. But it will be, to a small extent, you would be left woefully short because there may be other creditors in line in front of you. So if the business went into liquidation, then your prospects of getting a refund, to be quite honest with you, are not at all good. But if Mr. Ahmed is still a director of a business, then you can contact Companies House and advise them that he's not fit to be a director. Trading Standards can deal with that also. And that's why I suggested right at the start that you report the matter straight away to Trading Standards as well as a civil action. And of course, you know, by dealing with this in the media as you are now on this show, all the listeners are hearing about the appalling service that's been provided so far by this garage. And that they will obviously take a view whether they want to deal with the garage and whether they want to have any further business dealings with the director who's been so callous and irresponsible and completely turned a blind eye to what his legal obligations are, notwithstanding that you could have been killed as a consequence of this accident. So it's not really a very shrewd business move. My advice legally and from a reputational perspective is for Mr. Ahmed to get on the phone as soon as this program's finished, as soon as this interview is finished, and to talk about how can he recompense you for your loss and also compensate you for the suffering that you've experienced from the fire. Whether or not that happens, I know not. Failing that, you report it immediately to Trading Standards, and I would send a 7-day letter to the company today, pointing out what your loss is, giving them 7 days, and then commencing proceedings in the small claims court. But unfortunately, you do need to be aware that if the company goes into liquidation, your prospects of getting the money back are and of course, what we're talking about, you are insured. And I know you don't want to claim on your insurance. If you're forced down that road, then there's still a significant loss. But the problem, because of your age, is you will almost be, I won't say uninsurable, but the premium will be prohibitively expensive, and that's you're an innocent victim of that. But that may be the only way you can deal with this. I just don't know.
Has your insurance company told you what kind of financial effect it will have on your insurability in the future, Luke?
No, I'm not sure. I put in I told the insurance company, of course, but I asked them to hold the record as information only rather than an actual claim, if that makes sense. So I hope this can be resolved without me going through my insurance. Yeah.
Well, I really hope it can as well. And I'm exceptionally disappointed that Mr. Ahmed from Aux Motors Limited, based in Hayes, did not take the opportunity yesterday to call you and to resolve this matter. I have subsequently established at least one other company that Mr. Ahmed is running, Nick, related to the motoring industry.
What sort of company is that, Jonathan? Well,
I have established a body shop company, and there is also the potential for a tyre replacement company as well.
Yeah. See, if Mr. Ahmed doesn't deal with this in terms of legal compliance, then it may be that he will be deemed not fit to be a director. And that's quite possible because he's not illustrating at the moment by his conduct that he is fit to be a director. So the fact that he continues in business, I mean, obviously it's a matter for you, Jonathan, whether you name those companies on air. But if trading standards are involved, they will obviously look at what's happened here and where Mr. Ahmed is now and what he's doing and whether he's in fact fit to be a director.
I've contacted Trading Standards. I did that after our call yesterday, Nick. And Trading Standards are now going to investigate as well. I think it would be a very good idea, as Nick says, Luke, for you to put in a complaint with, I believe the council is Hillingdon Council. That was who I spoke to yesterday. They cover the Hayes and Uxbridge area. And you would need to put in a complaint to Trading Standards. This is a very, very serious issue. This is more than a car that's been purchased and broken down. This is a car that was purchased that could have killed the purchaser of that car. And it was only because of sheer luck that you managed to get out of that car before the whole thing went up in flames, Luke. It could have been much, much worse. I really hope, here we are on a Friday morning, I hope that Mr. Ahmed will either call you this afternoon and try and resolve this matter with you directly, so that when I next speak to you on the programme, we can then conclude that he has finally done the right thing and made sure that you are not out of pocket as a result of buying this car from him. I really hope that he will take that opportunity, or at the very least he will reflect on it over the weekend and will call you first thing on Monday morning to suggest he's going to do that. If he hasn't contacted you by Monday, then, as Nick says, the only further step you can really take, other than contacting Trading Standards and potentially the police as well, will be to begin that small claims court action. And I know you've already drafted your letter, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm, most happy about is that this guy isn't operating as that business anymore. I wouldn't want the same thing to happen to anyone else. So, I mean, that's the most important thing, first of all. And then, what's lost so far is lost. I mean, if it comes back, it's a bonus, I guess. But obviously, I don't want this kind of thing to happen to anyone else.
Listen, Luke, you need that money back because this, and I'm not exaggerating, and I'm sure Nick will back me up on this, but if you don't get a refund from Mr. Ahmed of Auks Motors Limited in Hayes, this is going to cost you a fortune for years. Because not only are you going to have to pay the £1,000 on top of everything else you've paid to your insurance company for the excess, but for at least 5 years, you are going to find that your insurance premium will be sky high if you are even insurable in the first place. You're 19 years of age. You know how expensive it is to get insurance on a motor vehicle when you're 19. If you've then made a claim within 2 days of having a car, I'm afraid you are going to see a huge financial impact. And you're working for the NHS. You can, I'm quite sure, do without that kind of cost.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a lot of money for anyone.
So it's completely unacceptable that you have not been reimbursed the money by the man that had taken your money 2 days previously.
Jonathan, can I just ask Luke a question?
Yeah.
Luke, did you have a history with the car? Was there a full history? Do you know how many owners the car's had or anything like that?
Yeah, so I contacted the website that I, bought the car through, and I've got the advert out of the archive, and it says service history on there, but I wasn't provided with anything at the time.
I'd ask for you want the service history of the car. I mean, what I'd be interested in is how many miles has the car done?
Around 60,000.
Okay, and do you know how many owners it's had or anything like that? I would just, as a matter of interest, want to speak to previous owners to just check the authenticity of it. I'm not suggesting it's not right, but it's always, under these circumstances, if there's an opportunity to checking actually who had the car, how long they had it for, how many miles they did for it, it may assist Trading Standards with their investigation.
Yeah, no, thank you for that advice. It's appreciated.
Nick, I want to thank you as always for your time. You're always generous on our programme with your time, and I really do appreciate it. Nick Freeman is the lawyer known as Mr. Loophole. Luke, let's leave it there for today. And Mr. Ahmed, of Orcs Motors Limited, based in Hayes, in Uxbridge. Do the right thing, refund your customer, because I'm going to talk to him again on Monday, and I hope that at that point I'll be able to say you've had a complete change of heart and you have decided to refund him the money. Otherwise, you can expect a letter from him outlining his intention to take you to court.